A source has said that Nelson Peltz might be winning in his battle to get on the board of the Walt Disney Company. And who is that source? The Wall Street Journal. Let's talk about that on That Park Place. Hello, I am Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place, and I am joined today not as a duo, but a triumvirate here to talk about what is going on with the Walt Disney Company. Here with me is Vash Guy, my Wookiee co-pilot, and Culture Casino, who is, I'm going to say, the Luke Skywalker of this situation, because I'm not going to call him Leia. I'm not going to call him C-3PO.
I just feel like a random Wookiee at this point. But
you could be R2-D2. Man of mystery, super useful. Beep bop boop.
Beep bop boop. I'll take the R2-D2 in a heartbeat. All right.
Got your saber right here.
Heartbeat.
Don't worry about that.
Right, put that into your skull and then launch it one movie later. All right, so let's talk about what's going on in the Wall Street Journal right now. I think we were all very surprised at this revelation. This out of the Wall Street Journal. Disney try and blitz shareholders for votes in the last stretch of proxy fight. Yes, I added the definitives in there. Forgive me for that. Neuberger Berman supports Trian slate, citing the company's succession woes, as others back CEO Bob Iger and his strategy, which is announcing things, apparently. This by Sarah Krause, Robbie Whalen, and Lauren Thomas. And this was updated March 28th, 3:51 p.m. Eastern Time. We're trying to get this to you as quickly as possible. There's a lot of context in here. Chief Executive Bob Iger and activist Nelson Peltz have spent months in their proxy fight detailing their vision of Disney's future. For some investors, the deciding factor will be the company's past. Yes, and past success is not an indicator of future success or failure. Several investors casting votes ahead of the company's April 3rd meeting, that is Wednesday of the following week from when we are releasing this video, good Lord willing and the creeps don't crawl, said they are grappling with whether Disney's board is capable of choosing a strong successor to Iger. They have criticized the board for its role in selecting Bob Chapek in 2020, ousting him 2 years later, and then extending Iger's contract after he returned. Forgive me for not putting this out to commentary too quickly, but I just want to point out that according to Disney's own filings right now and the things that they have said for the succession committee, essentially, first, Bob Iger recommended Bob Chapek for the CEO position, and the board said yes. It's supposed to be a 12-month interview period going through each member of the board, and then they vote yes or no on Bob Chapek. What happened is Bob Iger wanted to step down, and he said, hey, by the way, it's you. I'm just going to tell the board, and the board essentially said yes. So that's how it happened the first time. There was a unanimous vote at some point when things were rocky that they said, no, it's definitely Bob Chapek. We want to instill confidence. Unanimous vote. It's going to be Chapek. We're renewing him early for 3 more years. And then, of course, 6 months later, they unanimously voted him out. So that was a board decision. And now they are considering internal candidates, that being Dana Walden, Alan Bergman, Jimmy Pitaro from ESPN, and Josh D'Amaro. Right now, they have half of a good idea there. Those people don't seem to be capable of running a company like Disney. And why do I say that? Because they have essentially been running their own sections of the company right now, and none of them have done a particularly good job with either of those. So maybe they're going to be successful with things they've never done before. I don't see that. That's my opinion. But I don't see that extending out to a negative experience being positive for the company. Is that fair, guys?
Yeah, exceedingly.
I think it's completely fair because these people haven't necessarily been capable of running their own divisions, much less the entire company. So this, I don't necessarily think we should look inward for this search. By the way, I believe it was Deadline suggesting that perhaps they're also looking at is it the media manager? Is it the new position?
Global brand.
Yeah.
Asad Ayaz, he's been in Disney for some time. He has no experience that would be relevant to this, in my opinion. Right. I haven't heard him speak publicly. I need to do a little research on him to find out whether or not he would be a good idea for the role. If they're just looking for a figurehead, maybe. I don't know. Culture, do you have any thoughts on that?
Look, my thoughts are going to be very simple on this. you need somebody that has the whole package. They have to be charismatic. They have to be a front man. This is the most important entertainment company, or at least for now, although that's fading quickly. The bloom's off the rose. But what's happening is you have to have that guy or gal be able to stand up there in front of not just investors but consumers and sell Disney again. Disney hasn't been sold in a long time, not well anyway, and you especially as a family brand. So whoever this person is that takes over for Iger, they have to possess all of those other attributes. And outside of Bergman, Bergman, I don't see anybody else there that has that charisma and the business acumen. I think you're going to have a hard time struggling to find that complete package. Anyway, those are just my thoughts.
Think about it too. You also have to be able to negotiate contracts with these big media, these like people like Charter, for example, right? These ISPs or these broadcast providers or whatever. Yeah. You have to be able to negotiate those kind of contracts. You also have to have relationships in Hollywood. We saw how that kind of undermined Chapek a couple of times there. So I think having some relationship, at least with some big name talent, I think is appropriate as well.
Well, Vash, do you think that oh, sorry, just
go ahead,
Vash, I was going to ask, do you think that Chapek was also kind of undermined by Iger along the way?
Let's just make this clear. When Bob Chapek was in charge of this company, Bob Iger stayed on as a quote-unquote creative head of the entire company. So whoever was the chief creative officer of the company was overruled by Bob Iger, and the CEO was overruled by Bob Iger in several instances. Over the last 20 years, Bob Iger has either been CEO or executive chairman or both for all but 11 months of the last 2 decades of this company. So I'm just going to say this. If there are any creative problems at the company, you can't quite blame those on Chapek, because we're seeing the first this year, we'll be seeing some of the first things that Chapek said yes to within the company. The other thing I want to add is if Bergman and Walden and DeMauro and Jimmy Pitaro are all not doing well and they succeed once Bob Iger is out of the way, I think that's also an indictment of Bob Iger, because if removing him from the picture allows them to succeed in a way that they have not been for the last 4 years, then I say that is probably an indication of someone doing a poor job in this instance. So the reason we're focusing so much on the CEO aspect and the succession aspect here is because this is the crucial aspect to why Nelson Peltz has a pretty good case for getting on the board.
Right.
And replacing the person that he looks like he could replace.
Right. Let's
very specifically.
Let's get to these comments by Newberger Berman before we get to why this is such a shocking revelation to us. We don't think it would create undue harm for shareholders to have another couple of independent eyes and ears, says Joseph Amato, Chief Investment Officer and President of Newberger Berman, in an interview. The investment firm, which manages $463 billion in assets, own roughly 0.1% of Disney shares. Right now, according to Disney's reporting, Nelson Peltz holds 2% of the company. Owns is beneficial ownership, not literal ownership, because he's in charge of Perlmutter's shares, which Disney thinks that Nelson Peltz being in charge of Perlmutter shares is some kind of indictment on him. Doesn't matter. He owns that much of the company beneficially. So here is the part that we are very surprised by. Here in the casting votes section, many of the company's largest institutional shareholders, such as BlackRock and Vanguard, have yet to cast their votes and often wait until closer to the deadline. Individual investors are expected to have outsized sway, given that they hold more than 1/3 of shares. That's an interesting way of saying that 65% of Disney is institutionally held. I don't know if BlackRock or Vanguard will be listening to the people who actually own those shares, because they are retirement funds that are handling shares that are owned by other people, like a mutual fund situation where you have a lot of people paying into their retirement funds. They might not be as crazy about Bob Iger being on the board and Marielena Lagomasino being on the board in the way that Larry Fink, who's in charge of BlackRock, might, or whoever's in charge of Vanguard or State Street or any of those. Sure. So far, a minority of shareholders have voted. Emphasis there. As of Tuesday, just over 22% of votes had been cast. That is 1/5 of all votes. According to people familiar with the matter, the bulk of them held by individual and other smaller investors. Among those who have already cast their votes, Peltz leads Disney director Mary Elena Lagomasino. So right now, they are saying that Peltz is winning against Mary Elena Lagomasino, otherwise known on this channel as the woman who signs Bob Iger's paychecks. She's in charge of the compensation committee, and she is the one who has decided that Bob Iger, when he's comparing his financial performance, it gets compared to Discovery, Warner, and Paramount. But when we're talking about his pay package, he gets compared to Microsoft and Alphabet and Meta and Apple, companies 5 times the size of the Walt Disney Company. So that was Mary Elena Lagomasino's call to pay Bob Iger commensurate to media peers when it comes to giant companies that are $1 trillion in market capitalization versus Disney, which is in the billions, in the $200 billion range, thanks to Peltz coming in and boosting that stock price. That's my opinion.
Right.
And anything to add there, guys?
I think I think the argument at the time was, well, compared to how much some of these other media companies pay their CEOs, it's like, okay, well, maybe necessarily you can argue or justify paying those rates to Bob Iger, not necessarily based on performance, but based on how many others are getting paid, because you don't want to necessarily lose them, right? But there was not any indication that he would necessarily leave Disney for those other positions. So it is kind of weird how that compensation wasn't necessarily commensurate with how well the company was actually performing at those pivotal junctures in the company's history. This whole thing that Peltz might be in the lead here, this is a substantial development right here. We'll have to see how these votes actually play out, and I'm dying to know what the percentages on all of these things are and how much inroad Peltz may have made, even if he doesn't get on the board. But this is a positive indication for sure.
Right. So I just want to say this one thing, and then I definitely want to get Culture's comments because of some of the things you said before we started this video. A spokesman for Disney said leaking an early vote count was a highly inappropriate attempt to sway votes. I would agree that whoever released those figures did something that is highly inappropriate, and that doesn't say that they didn't do it. But here we are. Culture, I wanted to open this up to you because I think you had some interesting thoughts before we started here.
I did, and it really comes from me being skeptical of basically everything right now. So I think this is highly suspect. If this information is accurate, was leaked, and first of all, I'm going to give some elevated credibility because of the outlet this is coming from. This is the Wall Street Journal. Okay, so they're not going to run with something they don't fully believe is accurate because it reduces their credibility, and they're like one of the last entities out there that even like have some. So, but I am suspect that these numbers, this information isn't entirely accurate. I would suggest that it's quite possible that this is a targeted PR move, quite possibly that maybe the Wall Street Journal got information about it. Regardless, if you don't hold some of it suspect, you're going to maybe be extremely disappointed. Also, as you mentioned, this only represents 20% of all shares voted, right? Mm-hmm. In total, right? What I find odd is that 1/5 of the votes out there have been cast. But what I'm finding fascinating is that they're going so hard for an alternate candidate. It speaks to what you and I, investor, would likely vote. Of course, we'd probably also vote for Rasulo as well. But it doesn't speak to what these institutions are going to do, as was pointed out towards the end of the article. Now, you do have proxy advisors involved in this now, and a lot of educated investors have their ear to the ground with something like that, and some of the smaller institutionals and funds are listening to them. So it is possible that these numbers can come up high enough to displace the one candidate they're really truly targeting. And as I said before, and I meant it before we went into the last paragraph of the story, they are targeting that person specifically for two reasons: one, succession, and two, compensation. And yeah, so I'm warning the audience out there, load up on some sodium, right? Because you're going to need those grains of salt for maybe some of this. And
I'm agreeing with you. There are, and we have professional skepticism when Bob Iger releases a statement. It would be foolish of us to remove that professional skepticism when you hear something that you might want to hear. Always be wary of someone coming along telling you exactly what you want to hear. That's a generally good rule for life. Now, at some point, you do need to be just happy with whatever the result is and accept it and move on. But we won't know until April 3rd, as far as that is concerned.
Right. And as was suggested in the article, and just a reminder for the audience, they have until 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday before before this is over. Yes. And you're going to see a significant amount of electronic voting coming from the big ones. And you're right, whether or not BlackRock, Vanguard, all of the other larger institutional holdings out there listen to what the people are telling to vote their proxies, that's an entirely other thing, which also bothers me about some of the credibility.
One thing I'll point out here is BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street have been completely silent on this issue. They have not come out as in favor of Bob Iger or against Bob Iger. And Valiant Renegade released a video this morning that pointed out that the recommendation of ISS, Institutional Shareholder Services, might actually sway those larger investment areas here.
And yesterday or day before, he picked up Egan Jones.
Yes.
That's another advisory entity that I think a lot of institutionals and educated investors are going to listen to.
Right. So this speaks to the issue that Pro and I were both having, and we were coming to the same conclusion on this. Both of us were fairly certain Peltz was not going to win this year. Yeah. But the Walt Disney Company is advertising as if Peltz is winning.
Yes.
And I think that scares the living daylights out of them.
I do wonder
Vash, yes, go ahead, Vash, because then we need to wrap this thing up.
Of course, I do wonder if Disney conducted any kind of polling to kind of get the temperature of the room before this whole thing beforehand, because the amount of spaghetti that they've thrown at the wall here, we've said it many times before: the Epic Games deal, Taylor Swift deal, the Moana 2 thing, Jamie Dimon, George Lucas, Michael Eisner, Lauren Powell Jobs, Mason Morfitt, the Disney family all throwing their hat in for Bob Iger and the board right here. This is very unusual for the Walt Disney Company to make these kind of moves so aggressively at this point, at this juncture right here, to fend off Nelson Peltz. People will remember that they didn't necessarily do this last year, but now they're doing it this year. I think they really they are aware that the blood's in the water and that people smell it. So I think that's kind of what's going on here, and it's very interesting to track all of this. Glass Lewis has thrown their hat in the ring for Bob on the board there. The ISS, I think, really did kind of change that whole thing. Both of them, from what I understand, they hold like 90% of the opinion out there. This is a big deal,
right? And for sure. And I'll also add that Jerry Sonnenfeld, a career academic who has never had a real job for a real business in his entire life, said that he thinks that Nelson Peltz is most of his arguments are just a myth, and that Bob Iger is doing a fantastic job. And whenever he graduates from school, then I will start paying attention to his opinions.
Wow.
That being said, the annual shareholders live stream is on Wednesday of next week on the Valiant Renegade channel. I do need to point out that that Park Place is currently under legal threat by an institution that is not the Disney Company. And there will be more forthcoming. We'll be reading one of the documents that we received through their attorney over on the Valiant Renegade channel on Monday evening over there. Just to point that out for anyone who might be interested in that. If this conversation has been helpful to you in any way, please like this video, drop a comment. By the way, I also want to point out that 43% of shareholders withheld their vote for Michael Eisner to be on the board of directors, and that was the point at which he stepped down as chairman of the Walt Disney Company, and then paved the way for Bob Iger. So we don't have to have more than 50% for a change here at the Walt Disney Company. Just throwing that in there. And consider subscribing to That Park Plays for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Plays News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.